Imagine you are the last guardian of a burning library. The flames are coming, the centuries are closing in, and in your hands you hold the only copies of mathematical secrets that took 1,000 years to build. What do? You write, furiously, completely, and you make sure that nothing, not time, not fire, not the collapse of civilization itself, steals what brilliant minds sacrificed their entire lives to discover. That is exactly what one man did, and without him, the history of mathematics, and perhaps science itself, would look entirely different. His name was Pappus of Alexandria. Welcome to Numbers and Narratives by Bless Wright, the channel where the stories behind the numbers come alive. Today we travel back to the 4th century AD to the dazzling, dangerous, and deeply extraordinary city of Alexandria, Egypt, where a Greek mathematician named Pappus did something that most scholars of his era did not bother to do. He looked back, he gathered, he preserved, and in doing so he became the final great voice of an entire mathematical civilization before it fell silent for centuries. If you are new here, please subscribe right now and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story like this one. And if you have been with us before, welcome back. You already know what we do here. Now stay with me until the very end of this video, because I have saved one of the most astonishing and largely untold facts about Pappus for the final minutes. It is the kind of detail that will make you see this man and the entire history of mathematics in a completely new light. Do not skip ahead. It is worth the wait, I promise you. Let us begin. To understand Pappus, you must first understand Alexandria. When Alexander the Great founded the city in 331 BC on the northern edge of Egypt, beside the glittering Mediterranean Sea, he did not just build a port, he built a statement, a declaration that this place would be the intellectual capital of the world. And for many centuries, it was exactly that. Alexandria was home to the greatest library the ancient world had ever known, the Library of Alexandria, which at its height housed hundreds of thousands of scrolls, drawing scholars, philosophers, astronomers, and mathematicians from across the known world. Euclid taught here. Archimedes studied here. Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the earth from here. Hypatia later lectured and died here. This was the city into which Pappus was born, and somewhere around 290 AD. Some scholars suggest a date closer to 320 AD, but the uncertainty itself tells us something important. Pappus lived in an age when the records of individual lives were already beginning to blur. The great age of Greek intellectual culture was drawing toward its close, and the Roman Empire that had absorbed it was fracturing under its own weight. Pappus knew this, he felt it, and it drove everything he did. We do not know much about Pappus, the person. History has not been generous with biographical details. We do not know what he looked like. We do not know the precise year of his birth or his death. We do not know if he was married, if he had children, whether he was wealthy or poor, celebrated or obscure in his own lifetime. But we know a few things with certainty. We know he lived and worked in Alexandria, and we know he was a teacher. He addressed one of his major works to his own son, Hermodorus. That single detail is quietly moving. Imagine a father surrounded by manuscripts and calculations, looking at his child and thinking, I want you to understand this. I want you to carry this forward. We know he was active during the reign of the Roman Emperor Diocletian because he mentions a solar eclipse that occurred during that period. Historians have traced this to an eclipse in 320 AD, which helps pin at least part of his career to the early 4th century. And we know beyond any doubt that he was extraordinarily learned. The sheer scope of what he wrote and compiled demonstrates a mind that had not only read virtually everything produced by Greek mathematics up to his time, but had understood it deeply enough to comment on it, extend it, and in some cases, surpass it. He was, in the truest sense of the word, a scholar. The work that defines Pappus, the achievement that has kept his name alive across 17 centuries, is called the Synagoge, which in Greek simply means the collection. In Latin translation and in English scholarship, it is known as the mathematical collection. It is a monumental piece of work. Originally comprising 8 books, the first book and part of the second have been lost to time. But what survives is breathtaking in its breadth and ambition. Think of the mathematical collection as a grand guided tour through the entire landscape of Greek mathematics. Pappus moved through geometry, arithmetic, mechanics, astronomy, and mathematical theory with the ease of a master surveyor mapping known territory. He explained problems. He offered his own proofs. He summarized other mathematicians. He extended results that had been left incomplete. And crucially, he preserved texts and ideas that had already been lost in their original form by the time he wrote. Without Pappus, we would know far less about the works of Euclid, Apollonius, Aristaeus, and a dozen other ancient mathematicians. In some cases, we know what those men discovered only because Pappus told us. He is our window into a world that had already begun to disappear, even as he wrote. Let us walk briefly through the surviving books of the collection, because the variety alone is astonishing. Book 2 dealt with a system for expressing and working with very large numbers, building on ideas from Apollonius, in a tradition that Archimedes himself had explored in his famous Sand Reckoner. The ability to reason about enormous quantities is not just an intellectual curiosity. It is foundational to astronomy, physics, and cosmology. Book 3 tackled some of the most famous problems in ancient geometry. Problems like the construction of the arithmetic, geometric, and harmonic means, and discussions related to the 5 Platonic solids, those perfect geometric shapes, the tetrahedron, cube, octahedron, dodecahedron, and icosahedron, that had fascinated Greek thinkers since Plato. Pappus went beyond mere description and offered new constructions and proofs. Book 4 is perhaps the most mathematically rich of all the surviving books. Here Pappus discussed spirals, the quadratrix curve, and the problem of squaring the circle, one of the 3 great unsolved problems of antiquity. He surveyed the history of these problems with clarity and intellectual honesty, acknowledging what was known, what was unknown, and what had been wrongly claimed. He also, in this same book, described the 13 semi-regular polyhedra, the shapes we now call the Archimedean solids. Solids whose faces are regular polygons of 2 or more types, and whose vertices are all identical. Pappus attributed this discovery to Archimedes, and while Archimedes' original text on the subject has never been found, it is largely because of Pappus that we even know Archimedes discovered these shapes at all. Book 5 is extraordinary for a different reason. In it, Pappus proved a remarkable theorem, that of all plane figures with the same perimeter, the circle encloses the greatest area. This is the famous isoperimetric problem. His proof is elegant, and his framing of the problem is philosophically beautiful. He even compared it, in poetic terms, to the intelligence of bees, noting that bees construct their honeycombs in hexagons, and that the hexagon is the most efficient regular polygon for tiling a plane. Nature, he implied, had already discovered what mathematicians were still struggling to formally prove. That passage has survived nearly 1,700 years, and it still reads as something approaching wonder. Book 6 surveyed problems in astronomy and optics, covering works by Theodosius, Autolycus, Euclid, and Aristarchus. Books 7 and 8, dealing with analysis and mechanics respectively, are rich enough to deserve their own full discussions. Within the mathematical collection, one of the most important sections is what Pappus called the treasury of analysis, the body of knowledge belonging to the analytic tradition of Greek mathematics. In ancient Greek mathematics, analysis was a specific and powerful technique. To prove that something was true, you would begin by assuming it was true and then work backward to find consequences, until you arrived at something already known. The reverse process, synthesis, then built the proof forward. It was a discipline that required both imagination and rigorous logic. Pappus cataloged the books belonging to this tradition, works by Euclid, Apollonius, Aristaeus, and Eratosthenes, and provided summaries and extensions of each. Many of the original texts he described were already lost in his day or would soon be lost. Or his summaries became the primary source for later scholars trying to reconstruct ancient Greek mathematical thought. One modern historian described the mathematical collection as the single most important source for our knowledge of Greek mathematics after Euclid. That is not an exaggeration. It is a carefully considered scholarly judgment. But Pappus was not merely a compiler. He was a mathematician in his own right, and a significant one. Among his original contributions, 2 stand out above all others. The first is what we now call the Pappus hexagon theorem. This is a theorem in what we today call projective geometry, a branch of mathematics concerned not with measurement, but with the properties of figures that remain unchanged under projection. The theorem states that if you have 6 points alternating on 2 straight lines, and you connect them in a specific pattern, the 3 intersection points you produce will always lie on a single straight line. It sounds abstract, and it is, but it is also profoundly deep. This theorem, which Pappus proved in the 4th century AD, was not fully appreciated or developed until the 17th century, when mathematicians like Girard de Sargu and Blaise Pascal began building projective geometry as a formal field. Pappus had been there first, by more than 1,000 years. The second great contribution is a pair of theorems now known as the Pappus-Gulden theorem, sometimes called the centroid theorem. These theorems relate the volume and surface area of a solid of revolution, a shape created by rotating a curve around an axis, to the distance traveled by the centroid, the geometric center, of the original curve or figure. If you have ever calculated the volume of a donut shape, a torus, you may have used a formula that traces directly back to Pappus. The elegant logic of the centroid theorem turns what could be an enormously complicated integration problem into something almost beautifully simple. These are not the discoveries of a man who was merely copying others. These are the insights of an original mind. And yet, Pappus lived in a world that was ending. By the early 4th century AD, Alexandria was no longer the unchallenged intellectual center it had once been. The Roman Empire was fragmenting. Religious conflict was intensifying. The great institutions of pagan learning, including the Mouseion, the research institution connected to the Great Library, were under pressure from all sides. When the library itself, or rather the complex of libraries and institutions that bore that name, had already suffered greatly. The famous destruction that popular legend attributes to Julius Caesar's fire of 48 BC was in reality one of several disasters spread across centuries. By the time of Pappus, the great library institution had been damaged and depleted through neglect, looting, and political upheaval. It would be further devastated in the decades after his death. Pappus may not have known exactly how much was already lost, but he knew that the tradition was fragile. He knew that the living chain of teachers and students that had transmitted mathematical knowledge from one generation to the next was thinning. He knew in that quiet but certain way that deeply learned people sometimes do, or that a civilizational winter was approaching. And so he wrote, comprehensively, urgently, not just to record what he knew, but to ensure that those who came after would have something to build on, if they ever found the will to build again. His fears were justified. In 415 AD, perhaps 60 to 80 years after Pappus's death, the brilliant mathematician and philosopher Hypatia was murdered by a mob in Alexandria. She was the last major figure in the Alexandrian mathematical tradition. After her death, there was no one to carry the flame. Greek mathematical knowledge did not entirely disappear. It was preserved, partially in Greek manuscripts that survived in Byzantium, and significantly in Arabic translation, as Islamic scholars of the 8th, 9th, and 10th centuries recognized its value and translated major works into Arabic, adding their own extraordinary contributions. It was through Arabic transmission that much of what Pappus preserved eventually found its way back into European hands during the Renaissance. But the living, active, creative tradition that had run from Thales through Pythagoras, Euclid, Archimedes, Apollonius, and finally to Pappus, that tradition simply stopped. Not with a bang, with a silence. And in that silence, the mathematical collection waited. When European scholars began recovering Greek texts during the Renaissance and early modern period, the mathematical collection was among the most important manuscripts they found. It was translated into Latin in the early 17th century, and its impact on European mathematics was immediate and lasting. François Viet, the French mathematician who helped to create modern algebraic notation, read Pappus carefully. René Descartes drew on his work. Galileo consulted him. Isaac Newton read the mathematical collection and was deeply influenced by it. The problems Pappus had described, the methods he had cataloged, the theorems he had proved, all of them entered the bloodstream of the scientific revolution. A man who had lived and written in Alexandria in the 4th century AD was, in a very real sense, still actively shaping mathematics in 17th century Europe. That is the measure of what he built. Now, I promised you something astonishing, something most people who have heard the name Pappus have never been told. Here it is. In the mathematical collection, Pappus described a specific type of problem known today as the Pappus problem, or the problem of the locus to 3 or 4 lines. The problem asks, given 3 or 4 fixed lines, and a point that moves in such a way that the product of its distances to some of the lines always maintains a fixed ratio with the product of its distances to the others. What is the path traced by that moving point? Ancient Greek geometers, including Apollonius, had worked on versions of this problem. Pappus described it in full detail and noted that no one had been able to give a complete general solution. He expressed this frustration directly in his writing, an almost personal lament that this beautiful problem remained unconquered. It sat there, unsolved, for over 1,000 years. Then in the 17th century, a young French philosopher and mathematician named René Descartes picked up the challenge. He had read Pappus. One year he had read his description of the problem, and he was convinced that the ancient geometers had failed not because the problem was impossible, but because they lacked the right tool. So he invented one. Descartes' solution to the Pappus problem was one of the key demonstrations he used to introduce his revolutionary new method: coordinate geometry, the system of x and y axes, the fusion of algebra and geometry, the mathematical language in which virtually all of modern science, engineering, and physics is written. When Descartes published La Géométrie in 1637, the text that launched analytic geometry into the world, the very first major problem he solved was the Pappus problem. He used it as proof that his new method could do what the ancients could not. Think about what that means. A problem that Pappus described and lamented in Alexandria, around 320 AD, directly provoked one of the most important inventions in the history of human thought: the coordinate system in 1637 AD. That is a gap of over 1,300 years, and yet the line from Pappus to Descartes is direct, traceable, and documented. Without Pappus's collection being preserved, translated, and read, Descartes may never have encountered the problem that drove him to invent analytic geometry. And without analytic geometry, the physics of Newton, the calculus, the engineering of the Industrial Revolution, the mathematics behind modern computing, none of it looks the same. Pappus did not just collect ancient mathematics. He planted a seed that took 13 centuries to bloom, and when it did, it changed the world. Now that is the story of Pappus of Alexandria, the last great mathematician of antiquity, the collector, the preserver, the man who, in the dying light of one civilization, held a torch high enough to illuminate the birth of another. He never knew his name would survive. He never knew that a French mathematician in the 1600s would read his words and be moved to reinvent geometry. He simply did the work, faithfully, completely, as if it mattered, because it did. And 17 centuries later, it still does. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about what it means to preserve knowledge, please like this video and share it with someone who loves history, mathematics, or the stories of extraordinary human beings. Subscribe to Numbers and Narratives by Bless Wright if you have not already. Every video on this channel is a story like this one, about the human beings behind the numbers, the lives behind the equations, the passion and pain and brilliance that built the mathematical world we live in. The next story is already coming, and I promise you it is just as extraordinary as this one. Until then, keep counting, keep wondering, and never stop asking why.